Hi guys, so today we want to look at two things: the reward of sovereignty and the price of surrender. And I've checked my YouTube analytics show that many of you guys are enjoying this show. It's important to subscribe, share and like this video to as many people as possible so that other guys can also learn and enjoy the content. So I'm going to look at the reward of sovereignty and the price of surrender. As men, we normally have a biological or a psychological impulse to surrender, especially when you are faced by the seduction of a woman, the love of a woman, and so on. So we are going to look at some examples, because we normally say those who don't learn from history are likely to repeat it. Okay. About 4,000 years ago, the Greek Empire was spreading in around Asia and Europe, led by Alexander the Great. Okay, so Alexander was a Greek king or ruler, and he managed to take over the entire area of Asia, Europe, even parts of Egypt. So he had one great general called Ptolemy. Ptolemy is written with a PT, but the P is silent. And after the death of Alexander, Ptolemy was ruling for quite a while, and he was ruling from Alexandria, Egypt. That was his base. And Ptolemy now set up a dynasty, and it was what was called the Ptolemaic dynasty. So that dynasty, it lasted from about 350 BC to around 30 BC. Okay, 30 BCE, sorry. So what happened is that during this time, 30 BC is when now the Romans took over. So during this time of the Ptolemaic Egypt, there was a lady or a woman called Cleopatra. Cleopatra was an Egyptian woman. Actually, she was the last ruler of Egypt during the Ptolemaic dynasty. And she was an Egyptian. The thing about Cleopatra is that she was a very educated woman, very charming. She knew how to seduce men. In fact, it is said that she met Caesar during there was a problem in Egypt, and that's when they met. But Caesar took a liking to her immediately. And then what happened is that they say, I don't know how true it is, but it is said that she was smuggled in a carpet into Caesar's room, and they became friends. She charmed him, or he liked her, and they ended up having a child called Caesarion or something like that. So what happened is that later on, around 40 BCE, Caesar was assassinated. When Caesar was assassinated, Ptolemaic Egypt was divided into various regions. One of them was led by Mark Antony, was a general, and the other one was led by Octavian. Actually, Mark Antony married Octavian's sister. So after the death of Caesar, Cleopatra needed someone from the Roman Empire, because the Romans took over after the Greeks. She needed someone from the Roman Empire actually to be an ally to her. At the time, Rome had a lot of military campaigns, and in a sense, they didn't have a lot of resources compared to Egypt. So Egypt was like a vassal state. So what happened is that Cleopatra befriended Mark Antony, who was a general, and later on they had children. He even married her, and at a great cost to his own legacy. And later on, he ended up even taking his life, because he was in love with Cleopatra, and Cleopatra was also very cunning, very Machiavellian, and she ended up destroying him and his legacy. Uh, in the end, Mark Antony and Octavia ended up fighting because they were now fighting for supremacy. And Mark Antony actually lost and he was killed, but it was because of Cleopatra. So what actually happened is that Cleopatra would provide Mark Antony with a lot of resources. She used to organize for grand tours and appearances in public. And she used to portray herself as a goddess, a reincarnation of Isis. And also Mark Antony was portrayed as a reincarnation of an Egyptian god, and Mark Antony liked that. So how did this happen? How did an Egyptian woman change the trajectory of the life of a Roman general and lead to his demise? There's a lot to learn from this, because this is happening to a lot of men who fall in love with women. And I'm not even mentioning the story of Samson and Delilah. You know, there are many. There's the story of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And Prince Harry, of course, left the royal family. He left his throne, his legacy, his leadership to join Meghan Markle. And now he's basically like a homeless guy who has no career, who has no purpose, because he did that. Back home, we have the story of Luanda Magere, who fell in love with a Langi woman. The woman found out his weakness, and that is how Luanda Magere died. So these are men who have paid the price of surrender. Okay? We're going to look at the story of Mark Antony in detail, because his was actually written down in history by the Roman historian Plutarch. So what happened? The first thing is that Cleopatra targeted Mark Antony's ego. As men, we have weaknesses when it comes to our ego. When you get a lot of praise, sometimes you forget your purpose, you forget who you are. It is normally said that the Roman emperors, whenever they were sitting in the public square, there was always somebody standing on the shoulder of the king. And when the king was meeting people used to step forward and tell the king, you know, you are God, we worship you, you are the reincarnation of Zeus and whatever Greek gods or Roman gods were there. And this guy was standing at his shoulder. His job was just to tap the shoulder of the king and remind him, tell him that you are a man, you're not a god, you are a man, you're not a god. So women normally are able to charm their way through our hearts and our minds by appealing to our ego. So during Cleopatra's public demonstrations, she presented herself as the reincarnation of Isis, and Mark Antony became the reincarnation of Dionysus, who was also a god. Okay, so they had that spectacle in public, and it really bloated his ego. So instead of appealing to reason or statecraft, what Cleopatra did with Mark Antony was that she stroked his pride and fantasy, and that is how his judgment was blurred. So you must be very careful when your ego is being massaged by a woman, not to allow your judgment to be blurred. Okay? And then the other thing that Cleopatra did, by the way, Cleopatra was not particularly beautiful, but the thing about her is that she was very seductive, and she was very educated, very intelligent, full of wit, very funny, and also very, very sexual. So what she did is that she provided this guy with pleasure. And as I mentioned earlier, Rome, because of having so many military campaigns, they were struggling in terms of wealth. Cleopatra provided him with a lot of wealth. Egypt had a lot of wealth. She was the queen at the time. So this guy got whatever it is that he needed. Okay? So whatever resources he needed, Cleopatra provided. She gave him gifts, luxuries, but there were strings that were attached. Okay? And she pulled him deeper and deeper into her orbit and into her frame. So he became dependent on Cleopatra, not just militarily, but also for his lifestyle, his indulgences, and his ego stroking. Okay? So these guys were spending a lot of time on luxury. Obviously, having sex, hanging around saunas, being entertained, having the best food, the best wine, and all that. He became dependent on that. He forgot his own legacy, and now he was spending a lot of time in her castle and in her premises. Okay. Now, what happened is that Mark Antony was also distracted from his mission by her. Instead of securing Rome's eastern provinces and check the area called Parthis, he was spending a lot of time with Cleopatra. He got caught up in court life, okay? And the court life, of course, involved drinking parties, festivals, and self-indulgence. They had something they called the Inimitable Livers Club, which they formed, and this was basically like an elite hedonism, very similar to what Puff Daddy had with the Freak-Offs, but this was then. So they called it Inimitable Livers. Only the biggest people in the society could attend, the generals, the kings, and other rulers. So it was not open to anyone, but it was purely hedonism. Okay? So what happened is that when Mark Antony was busy enjoying pleasure with Cleopatra, his rival Octavian was busy consolidating power in Rome. Okay? And in addition to all this, she also bore this guy children. So she had 3 children for Mark Antony, and which she told him were going to be his heirs or his successors. Okay, 3 children. Now, one mistake also that Mark Antony made was what we called the donations of Alexandria. Cleopatra made a lot of big donations to Rome, particularly to Mark Antony, and the Roman population saw that as a major compromise. Okay, what they said is that it represented putting Cleopatra's dynasty above Rome's interest. It also hurt their pride. This was not good for them because they were the power. They were the ones who were in power at that particular time. And then, of course, this, unfortunately for Mark Antony, his rival Octavian used this to argue or appeal to the people that Mark Antony was enslaved by Alexandria. He was a simp, to use modern terms. So he was telling this guy is simping for a foreign queen. Remember, Cleopatra was an Egyptian woman, and this guy was a Roman leader. Furthermore, she isolated this guy from Rome. Remember, he was a Roman. He was supposed to be the heir apparent of Caesar, because Caesar has now died. The dynasty has been divided, or rather the empire has been divided between these generals. Instead of spending time in Rome, he was spending all the time with Cleopatra in Egypt. So he was isolated from his people. He did not have any foot on the ground, so to speak. And remember, as I mentioned earlier, Mark Antony was actually already married to Octavian's sister. That was his wife. Cleopatra made him actually leave and pushed him away from any Roman links. So he had no more political alliances now with Octavian. Because remember, as I mentioned in the earlier video, one of the reasons why marriage was created as a cultural artifact was to create alliances between tribes, between communities. So when Mark Antony separated from Octavian's sister, there was no more alliance. Now it's like Cumane, mano a mano. So that was a problem because he created now an enemy, he's no longer an ally. Now, what happened is his father isolated him. So now, instead of going to Rome, now he was fully in Cleopatra's court, living in her quarters, having children with her, eating her food, drinking her wine, and so on. He was totally taken in a frame. So the result of this is that he lost frame. Instead of being a Roman general who was conquering the world, okay, and instead of treating Cleopatra as a political ally, which was now supposed to be the plan initially, he became the man who followed Cleopatra's lead. He became like a lapdog. This is very similar to the case of Prince Harry. So he was following this woman around. And his rival Octavian actually exploited this. So what did Octavian do? He portrayed this guy as weak, feminized, compromised simp, which of course made him lose popularity among the Romans. And you know, Romans were a warlike people. They are people who believed in bravery, in the warrior spirit, and so on. And on 31st CE, the final blow came. So Antony literally broke off the battle to follow Cleopatra's retreating ships, which was a symbol of how far he had lost focus. It is said that he heard that Cleopatra had died. She had not died, she just wanted him to go to her, which of course is a manipulation tactic. Unfortunately for Mark Antony, he was so besotted with her, he attempted suicide. He tried to kill himself. He stabbed himself, he inflicted serious injuries on himself. He did not die immediately, but later on, as Octavian now came to attack him where he was, those same injuries killed him, and it is said that Cleopatra also later killed herself because she was heartbroken by this. So what we are learning here is that Cleopatra did not use any witchcraft or magic. Many men normally use witchcraft as an excuse. The reality is that she exploited his weaknesses for validation, for attention, for love, pleasure, and dependency. So as a man, you should never be dependent on a woman or on another person for your own resources or upkeep. You have to be a man that is able to take care of himself. This guy depended on Cleopatra fully for pleasure, for love, for resources, even for sheltering himself and political strategy. So he lost because of that. Okay? He failed to maintain his own frame and mission. You must be able to maintain your frame and be able to be true to your mission at all times. Okay? If you allow yourself to enter the frame of a woman and she dictates the terms, we say that a man without mission is a man without meaning. And that's what happened to Mark Antony. So his rival Octavian actually took full advantage of that. So in the end, he sacrificed his empire for this woman, while Octavian kept his focus. He played the long game and became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. So Antony is remembered as Cleopatra's puppet, while Octavian, his rival, actually now became the first emperor of Rome, Augustus. Now, so that is what we are going to talk about today. From that cautionary tale of Octavian and Mark Antony, we are going to look at the lessons that we have as men. When you are dealing with romantic relations with women, what can we learn? Okay? The first thing is that love does not equal loyalty. Love can die, and love can also make you lose focus to the more important things in your life, which is your mission. You need to focus on your mission. Without frame, even kings bow. Remember, this guy was a king. He ended up actually trying to commit suicide because he did not have frame. He surrendered everything, his mission, his will. He became dependent. He became very, very helpless. He actually became like a child. Rollo Tomasi normally said in Irrational Male 2013, love is women's game, but respect is a man's game. A man who chases love forfeits respect. And when you forfeit respect, you also forfeit power. So we want to look at power and the illusion and the price of surrender. Because in many cases, men have been portrayed to be very powerful, but then you find that the people who are actually powerful in many cases are actually the women. The case of Jezebel and King Ahab. You look at the case of Samson and Delilah, and now the case of Cleopatra, okay, and Mark Antony. They teach us a lot. Now, what normally happens is that when men get entangled with women, many times power imbalances arise. And the way they arise is through various means, which I'm going to mention briefly. What we have to remember is that power is not brute force. And this is where people get confused. You think when you have muscles, when you have resources, you are the one who is in power. It does not happen like that. Power is just frame. And that's why we talk about the masculine frame. Frame is the ability to set the reality and have it accepted. If you're able to set the reality and have it accepted, then you're the one who is in power. You say, this is where we are going to live. This is what we are going to eat. This is where we are going to go. That is setting the frame. And when this frame is accepted, then we say you are the one who is holding the frame. Many men are not able to do this, and it's normally to their detriment, as we are going to see in a short while. So imbalances, power imbalances normally creep in the relationship in a very subtle manner. I talked about sheet tests, and there are several other dynamics that men often ignore. And that's why we are doing this video, to remind guys, because many people think that because they have money and because they have muscle, they're the ones who are in power. Power is normally taken away even from the most powerful men, as we've seen. So the first one, what Rich Cooper calls betaization by 1,000 conceptions, where you become betadized through making concessions. And these concessions, most of them come in form of sheet tests. Okay, I already talked about sheet tests in an earlier video. The second one is gaslighting, where your perceptions are questioned until you start doubting yourself, you start second guessing yourself. You no longer can rely on your own judgment. Okay, gaslighting is a very powerful tool that is also used for taking away power from you. Then there is guilt tripping, where your sacrifices are weaponized against you. You sacrifice, she wants you guys to upgrade, maybe move to a new place or buy a new car, you take a loan. When you start struggling, she tells you, I didn't force you, you didn't have to do it, and yet you're trying to actually meet or provide for her. So that is guilt tripping. Kevin Samuels actually codified this. He used to call it sign language, SING, where S stands for shame, I is insults, N is the need to be right, and G is guilt tripping. Okay. Then there's also weaponized incompetence. I talked about weaponized incompetence in the earlier video, where she says, I can't do it, you do it. And many men do this until they're taking 90% or 100% of the responsibilities at home. We have so many guys whose wives are working, they have salaries, but they don't make any contribution in the house. This is because of weaponized incompetence, where a woman appeals either to hyper agency and she tells you you are the one who is earning more. And men, because of either their pride or poor social skills, are not able to hold them to account. So you find so many men are struggling to make ends meet, and yet you have a woman who has hundreds of thousands of shillings or even millions in a bank account, and yet you are surviving on loans. So this weaponized incompetence also creates a power imbalance, because it strips off your strength. Now, instead of becoming partners, you are living with a parasite, and she leeches off everything that you have. And then there's also passive aggressiveness, where there is withheld intimacy, there is cold shoulders, sighs, silence, and these are used as levers of control. And I talk about those ones in Unplug 5, operant conditioning. So all those are used. Passive aggressive ways is how you get operant conditions. Your behavior is controlled. Okay. And then there's also the emotional labor. This one starts straight from the church, where the man is expected to shoulder all her emotional storms, her moods, her chaos. You become the entertainer. Take her out, make sure she goes for lunch, make sure she goes out dancing, you make sure she has a holiday, and so on. So all your emotional needs are dismissed. You're told to man up. And this is one reason why many men find themselves in the hands of what we call side chicks, because at home there's no room for your own needs. Okay, this is because the men are supposed to take up all the emotional labor of the woman. Okay, and then the other thing, and which I mentioned earlier about the guy who was taking a walk in the forest with a dog. There is one about raising the bar. The modern woman has really raised the bar for men. You are told providing and protecting is not enough. You know, that is so basic. You need to do more. You need to make sure that I'm okay. You need to listen to me. You need to listen to my frustrations. Take me out. Make sure that I have some allowance monthly. You need to make sure I go for a holiday. You need to make sure I have a car. You know, you get a domestic servant for me. All those things, they really make men fail to appreciate themselves, because you are not appreciated. Many men, without that validation, they feel like they are nothing, and that's how they lose power, because it puts you in a position where you feel you need to do more so that you can be appreciated. The more you get unappreciated, the more you want to do more so that you can be appreciated. It's a vicious cycle. It's like a trauma bond. Many men are losing power because they are caught in that trauma bond. Esther Villa wrote a very good book called The Manipulated Man. And in that book, she exposes the dynamics fully. And she says that women wield weakness as power, while men break their backs to serve illusions of equality or power. So you men, you're trying to work so hard so that you can be equal, but in reality, the woman is much, much stronger than you. Many men still think that money secures authority, but resources only grant leverage if anchored in frame. Without frame, resources become chains. Okay? You can be filling a hole, an endless pit. You provide resources, becomes like a black hole. You see the examples of Jeff Bezos. This guy had all the money in the world. Okay? He was the richest man alive at the time. But he still lost half of his empire in divorce. It was not enough for his wife. Tiger Woods was the greatest golfer in history. Heavily talented. The guy was able to do miracles on the golf course. But he was brought down by scandal about that involved women and divorce settlements. They almost made him bankrupt. Kings like King Henry IV, okay, the one who rewrote the laws of England. Even there were guys who were behind the formation of the Anglican Church. They just wanted to satisfy women or to get women. Like this guy rewrote the laws of England just to satisfy his wives. Women, this also has destroyed, we've seen, destroying the Rome's authority, destabilizing his kingdom, and so on. And still, King Henry died broken. Okay? So, men must remember that financial dynamics or financial disparity, social status, and career success, they shape dynamics. Okay? They do. But only temporarily. The most important thing is your frame. Once respect is gone, even billions cannot save a man. So respect is the most important thing that you should always be aware of and that you must maintain when you're interacting with the women. The Kenyan men who are in diaspora have this problem where when they find black American women too difficult to deal with, they ask someone to get them a Kenyeji woman from Kenya. And most of the times these Kenyeji women go there. Maybe they go as economic refugees. You know, she's from a poor family. She probably dropped out. And you think now because you have money, you're in the US, you're the one who is housing and so on. And this has happened even to Nigerian men. After a while, this woman finds you have a weak frame. She blasts through it. And many of those relationships end very badly. Sometimes these men commit homicide. They kill these women, or they commit suicide themselves because they lack frame. So power is not about resources. It is not about money. It is not about brute force. It's about holding your frame. Do not surrender this frame in the face of romance or in the face of seduction. Warren Farrell wrote a book called The Myth of Male Power. And he reminds us in that book, so it was published in 1993, it reminds us that men appear powerful, but society positions them as disposable utilities. Okay? Men are providers until they are used up and then they are discarded. I've alluded to this before. We've seen so many cases where men retire into very lonely lives after their productive years are gone, and the women join the kids, maybe abroad or in the city, as the man remains alone in the village. This happens a lot, and this is a trajectory we must change as men. You must put yourselves first. Don't raise a family with very naive illusions or fantasies. You must be practical. Because if you ignore the game, there's a huge cost to be paid. Okay? Not just during your retirement, even during the marriage. What happens when you ignore the game? What happens when you give up your frame? The first thing is that resentment festers. Women become, these same women you give the frame to, they become resentful towards you. They lose respect for you because women want men who are strong. They resent men who are weak. In fact, they feel cheated. Okay? Even if they cannot articulate this, that is the case. And the men who have dropped their frames will always tell you this, that they made a mistake. They did not know that things will turn out like that. Okay? You'll also find that the cheaters increase. There'll be a lot of conflict repeats. You'll be arguing over nothing. Because when a woman feels that you don't have a frame, she always wants to foment discord. Okay? We call it fabricating indignation. She'll start being angry and start quarreling you over nothing. It used to be called pettiness. And I think the Bible talks about this, that it is better to live alone than to be under a roof with a quarrelsome woman. A quarrelsome woman basically is a woman who feels that the man she has is weak or is not competent. Okay? And being weak does not necessarily mean you are weak. It just sometimes means you don't have room for maneuvering. And that's why I mentioned earlier, the powerful man normally guards his resources jealously, and he makes sure that he has room for maneuvering. Rollo Thomas is very clear about that. And the other thing is that your identity is going to erode. Many men, once they get married, they drop their hobbies, they become less ambitious, they start eating and sitting at home, they become fat, they become lazy, okay? They even cut off their brothers, their brotherhood. They stop hanging out with their friends, okay? The reality of that is your identity erodes. You become feminized. In fact, many men start developing breasts. They start having aromatizers. We call them aromatizers, okay? When you have a lot of estrogen in your body. And sometimes this happens when you spend so much time around women or around a woman, okay? So later you realize too late you abandoned your mission, okay? You abandoned your friends or your brothers. Your brotherhood is gone, and you don't have a frame. You've entered a frame, okay? Now what happens is you become powerless. How do you know a man is powerless? When a man, even when he wants to go for a drink, he has to ask for permission. Before he can make any kind of commitment, he has to ask for permission from his wife. These are things he could do in the past without asking anyone. He has lost his power, he has lost his freedom, okay? And these are the men who say happy wife, happy life. So the statistics confirm this. These men who have lost their frame, they are also the men who are women are divorcing. 70% to 80% of the time, it's women who are initiating divorce, okay? And divorce costs men more than money. Sometimes money is not even the thing. Divorce comes with alienation from your children. Many men also lose their purpose and even their mental health. Many of them go into suicide. I know of a guy who was separated from his wife. He drank himself to death. He was not eating. He just bought a lot of alcohol and sat in his house. He was found dead. So many men lose their sanity because of that. And also, a research by Wilcox in 2022 showed that men have reported a declining happiness in marriage, while women are also reporting an escalated degree of expectations. Women want more. They are still expecting more, okay? And this pattern is consistent. The men who surrender frame, they lose respect, resources, and often their legacy. This has happened. Samson of Manoah. We've looked at Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Okay, we've looked at, we know the story of Jezebel and King Ahab and so on. That pattern is consistent. Any man who surrenders his frame to a woman is always going to lose respect, is going to lose his legacy, and is going to lose resources. Okay, the resources you can lose in form of what we call financial abuse, where this woman is just going to pile demands and demands on you, and you keep paying and paying and paying and trying to meet escalating demands until you become bankrupt because you cannot say no to her. Okay, so that is very, very important. Now, that is the price of surrender. How do you reclaim your sovereignty? In closing, okay, so the solution is not submission to illusions, but to master yourself. You have to master yourself. That's the most important thing you need to master. It is yourself, the guy in the mirror. And that is normally your biggest weakness, and that is your biggest enemy. It's the person in the mirror. That is the person you have to control. How do you do this? The first thing is your mission must come first. The guys who don't have a mission, it's very unfortunate, but you must find your mission. If you are a man who does not have a mission, we are saying you don't have a meaning. Your life is you're just floating. You're like a football that can be kicked in any direction by anyone. So a man must find a mission and make his mission the most important thing in his life. Your mission is your anchor, okay? Without a mission, you have no anchor. You're just floating. You're like debris. Women lose respect for men who don't have direction. Your mission is what is going to give you direction. It is the one that is going to be your true north, okay? And also men who don't have a mission, also they start orbiting their wives. Okay, you start hanging around with her, start spending so much time with her because you're not focused on your purpose. You're making the woman your purpose. Lose your mission, lose your respect. That is how it is. Okay, the choice is yours. Now, the other thing is you must cultivate emotional resilience as men. I've talked about stoicism. You must understand female nature. You must be able to deal with adversity, okay? Never depend on a woman financially, for shelter, for food, and so on, okay? Even external validation, you must find ways of validating yourself. Some men feel that if your woman does not love you, you are worthless. You must find much more safer, healthier, and grounded ways of validating yourself, not the love of a woman. Lastly, if the modern marriage contract is not working for you, as a man, we are problem solvers. We must explore alternative relationship models, okay? Question societal dogma, for example, of lifelong monogamy. If it is not working, it's not working. That is not the only path to male fulfillment, because there are many men also who grow up thinking if you don't have a lifelong monogamy with a woman, you're a useless man or your life is not worth living, and they end up being depressed and committing suicide. You cannot do that. You have to define relationships on your own terms. So as men, that is something you must do. Boundaries must be enforced without any kind of apology. Boundaries are not cruelty, okay? They are survival. Boundaries are like your oxygen when you're in a relationship, okay? A man without boundaries is a utility. You will be used and dumped. That is how it works. When you're facing manipulation, whether it's gaslighting, whether it's the emotional tantrums or shit tests, you need to approach them calmly, point them out, okay? Don't rage, don't beg, don't appease. Just point it out, okay? So the other thing you must do is that you must expose manipulation calmly. You have to call out manipulation. Don't deal with manipulation through silence. If you see something, just call it out calmly. Don't rage, don't appease, don't beg. And also it's very important for you to have resources. A man must be able to solve his survival problems. You must have resources. It's very difficult for you to hold frame when you have to beg for food. Don't rely on a woman. Don't expect to be able to hold frame with a woman when you're actually relying on her. You cannot be dependent on a woman, okay? There are many men who are broke that expect to appeal to either religion or societal norms that a woman should submit to them, even when the man is not able to take care of his business. You cannot do that. You must be able to provide resources for yourself. Work hard. Even if you have to, roast maize on the roadside or do a small business, you do it, but don't rely on a woman. Okay? You cannot have resources without, you cannot have frame without resources. And also don't isolate yourself. You must put or prioritize brotherhood over isolation. Many men who are isolated are the ones who are very, very weak because they are not able to get the masculine energy from other men or to get advice or to get support. So the women actually are able to, they're beholden to their women. They're not able to get the strength from fellow men. There's a reason why men need to network, share experiences, and this also can help you even in terms of your career and in terms of getting advice and support you during rough times. The Roman Empire, for example, it fell when the legions broke off. The groups of men became isolated and so on. So men need to stick together. Also, take time, understand female nature, understand Brifold's law, understand how hypergamy works, understand the difference between attraction and desire, and take your agency in your romantic life, okay? In the Way of Men, Jack Donovan reminds us that strength, courage, mastery, and honor, they remain as eternal male virtues. Let me repeat them. Strength, you must be strong, physically, mentally, everywhere. Courage, you must be bold, you must be able to be decisive, make decisions, make your mistakes and learn from them. Mastery, you must have at least one skill that you've mastered to world-class level, okay? I saw recently Jordan Peterson said, so you are useless, fine. Why don't you do one useless thing but do it so well that no one else can do it like you? You must have one skill. Mastery is part of masculinity. okay? And you also must be honorable. Say what you mean, keep your word, okay? And respect yourself. Those are male virtues. You must respect them. A man who embodies these virtues is very hard to topple, okay? So ultimately, you have to decide to pay the price of surrender or to enjoy the reward of sovereignty. You saw the example of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Mark Antony surrendered and he lost. Okay? Octavian retained his sovereignty and he won. He became the first Augustus. Okay? Men who surrender to women, they are undone by them. They lose their legacy, they lose their resources, they get divorced and so on. Samson of Delilah, I talked about Wanda Magere, Mark Antony, King Ahab, and Jezebel, and so on. The men who stuck to their mission come on top and they become victorious. They can even remembered in history. So the difference is just frame. You either enforce it or you surrender it. You surrender frame, you get forgotten and you pay a very huge price. So I'm going to close it with this quote. If you cannot hold frame, okay, you will pay with your crown, with your legacy, and with your soul. I'll see you on the next one.